Good evening. Thank you, Ms. Blair and members of the panel. I have to admit to a certain disappointment, a very personal nature, with this selection process, because I was expecting all kinds of brown envelopes and other, shall we say, under-the-table inducements. And to my great disappointment, I've been offered nothing. Now, whether that's because of belief in my probity or some other reason, I don't know. But as I say, it's made the decision far harder because I didn't have any financial inducement to steer the committee in any particular direction. The awards, the announcement of the awards was only, a couple of months ago, and it went out through the sort of normal channels, and I must say I was somewhat diffident as to whether we would get sufficient nominations in the time available, and I was pleasantly surprised that indeed we did get large number of very high quality nominations, both for the institutional award and the individual award. That made our task even harder, of course, but was nevertheless very gratifying. And I think we owe a great deal to HSBC's generosity and even more perhaps to the visibility that their sponsorship has given to the whole occasion. I will very briefly outline the criteria we use for the institutional award. And I won't go into much detail, and let me assure you that there's to be no discussion whatsoever as to our decision. You don't have time for it. But in the first round of the institutional award, we looked at operational self-sufficiency, which I regard as a typical development weasel word, profitability, and efficiency, also as measured by the number of people who could be dealt with by one field staff member, at capital adequacy, at par, portfolio at risk, although if we'd heard Shubanker pleading for less attention at 99%, as he was just a few minutes ago in the plenary, we might have had to modify that, and return on assets. And then we went to a second and more critical round where we looked at growth, governance and transparency, degree of innovation, social performance, and the additional services that were offered in addition to financial services. That was obviously more difficult and more subjective. The range of institutions which are represented demonstrated to me, not that perhaps it was necessary, the necessity in this country to have an enormous variety of different types of institution offering different kinds of products of different size in different areas and so on. I'm not always popular when I remind people that India is by such an enormous long chalk the poorest country in the world. And of course individual states in India would compete very well with many parts as to be the poorest country in relative terms, but of course in absolute terms India, no other country can possibly compete with it in the scale of its poverty. And therefore it needs an enormous number and variety of approaches to microfinance, as well as, of course, all the other approaches which are necessary to try to rid this country and indeed rid this world of this awful disgrace. I mention this maybe in a critical vein, but I guess for the last 20 or 25 years of my life, I've been trying in a small way to do something about poverty in India. I should be every bit or perhaps more ashamed of that situation as everybody in this room, but at least the variety and number of microfinance institutions are doing their bit, which is certainly not going to solve the problem on its own. But as I say, the number of submissions was a very welcome indication of that. When we came to individuals, again, the number of individuals, a number of whom were known to me and a number of whom were not, reminded me of personally, and this is very personal, of the reason why I like working in this country. And I have lived in it off and on, and worked in it most of the time, commuted to it for the last 20 years. And when people ask me why I do such an unusual thing, because why do you, well, never mind, but you can understand the reasons they may question my judgment in spending so much of my time in this country. I guess the main reason I do is that I have the privilege of working with large numbers of the most remarkable people. People who can't jump on the aeroplane and go away after a one-year sabbatical or a two-week visit like I can, but are stuck day and night, 24 hours a day, all around the year, with all the frustrations, the problems, the issues, the scale, the difficulties, corruption, whatever it may be, of working in this country, and remain cheerful, remain successful, and achieve miracles. And a large number of those people were represented in the nominations for this award, and it gave me pleasure, great pride indeed, to realize how many of those people I've had the good fortune to work with. And of course it was extraordinarily difficult to select which one should be the recipient of this award.